Block 1. Mani's Origins. Light. Picture the world in the 3rd century. The Roman Empire, a sprawling behemoth, is beginning to creak under its own weight, while in the east, the powerful Sasanian Empire of Persia is on the rise. This is a world of immense flux, a vibrant, chaotic marketplace of ideas. Along the dusty arteries of the Silk Road, not just spices and silks are traded, but gods, philosophies, and entire cosmologies. Zoroastrianism, the ancient faith of Persia, jostles with burgeoning Christian communities, pockets of Gnosticism, distant echoes of Buddhism, and the complex pantheons of Babylon. Into this swirling crucible of belief, in the year 216, a man named Mani was born. And he was about to set the world on fire with an idea so powerful, so elegant, and so dangerous that it would be branded the single greatest threat to Christianity for 1,000 years. This is the story of the forgotten religion of light and how its radical vision of evil would secretly reshape its greatest rival. Mani grew up in southern Mesopotamia, part of a Jewish Christian Gnostic sect known as the Elsassites. From a young age, he was steeped in a world of spiritual purity, asceticism, and esoteric knowledge. But Mani was destined for something far grander. At the age of just 12, he experienced his first revelation. He claimed to have been visited by a divine messenger, a luminous spirit he called or his heavenly twin. This being, he said, was his true self, a celestial counterpart from the realm of light, who began to slowly unveil the universe's profound secrets to him. For the next 12 years, this education continued, until, at the age of 24, his twin returned with a final, world-shattering command. It was time to leave his old sect behind and proclaim a new, universal truth to all of humanity. And what was this truth? It was a vision of the cosmos that was breathtaking in its scope and terrifying in its implications. Mani taught that reality was not the creation of a single, all-powerful God. Instead, from the very beginning of time, two eternal, co-equal, and utterly opposed principles have existed, locked in a perpetual state of war. On one side, you have the kingdom of light, ruled by the Father of Greatness, sometimes called Zervan. This is the realm of the spirit, of intelligence, peace, and order. It is a place of pure, unadulterated goodness, composed of 5 brilliant elements: light, wind, fire, water, and ether. On the other side, there is the kingdom of darkness. This is the domain of the Prince of Darkness, a being of pure malevolence, the embodiment of chaos, greed, and base desire. His realm is a turbulent, disgusting place of smoke, scorching fire, destructive winds, and bitter, briny waters. Crucially, in Mani's system, these two forces were uncreated and co-eternal. The Prince of Darkness was not a fallen angel, not a rebellious creation of the good God. He was and always had been a primordial power in his own right. This wasn't a family squabble in heaven, this was a war between two rival gods who had existed completely independent of each other for all of eternity. The central drama of the universe, according to Mani, began with a cosmic accident. The chaotic, brutish forces of the kingdom of darkness, in their endless, mindless turmoil, stumbled upon the border of the serene kingdom of light. Envious and greedy, the Prince of Darkness launched a savage, unprovoked assault, seeking to conquer and consume the light. The Father of Greatness, being inherently peaceful, could not fight evil with its own violent methods. Instead, he evoked a series of divine beings to act as a defense. The most important of these was the primal man, who, armed with 5 light elements, descended to the border to do battle. But the primal man was overwhelmed. The forces of darkness, the monstrous archons, managed to devour him and his armor of light. This was a catastrophic event, but it was also part of a divine strategy. The light particles became a kind of poison, a good leaven mixed into the evil dough of the dark realm. The archons had swallowed a bait they could not digest. The material universe, including our Earth and humanity itself, was then created by the forces of darkness as a prison. It was a complex, multi-layered containment system designed to trap these scattered fragments of divine light for as long as possible. Humans, therefore, are the central battlefield in this cosmic war. Each person is a duality. Our soul is a divine spark, a particle of that captured light from the primal man, while our body and our passions are the product of darkness, a cage of matter designed to keep the soul enslaved. The entire purpose of religion, the purpose of Mani's mission, was to awaken humanity to this reality and teach them how to liberate the light within. This was the religion of light, a grand cosmic rescue operation. You can immediately see why this was so radical and so appealing. Compared to the often complex and sometimes seemingly contradictory explanations for evil in other faiths, Manichaeism offered a stunningly clear and logical answer to the eternal question, why do we suffer? The answer wasn't a mystery veiled in divine will. It wasn't a punishment for a distant ancestral sin. Suffering exists because the very fabric of the material world is a product of an evil cosmic power. The world isn't broken. It was built this way. This message resonated with millions. Mani, a brilliant organizer and missionary, presented his faith as the final, perfect synthesis of all previous religions. He called Zoroaster, the Buddha, and Jesus his precursors, prophets sent to reveal parts of the truth which he was now completing. This syncretic approach allowed his faith to adapt and flourish wherever it went, spreading with incredible speed from the Roman Empire in the West, through Persia and Central Asia, all the way to China in the East. It was a universal church for a universal struggle, and at its heart was the terrifyingly clear vision of an eternal, all-powerful enemy. Manichaean devil, dualism. So, we have this grand cosmic stage, a war between two eternal gods, with humanity as the tragic, light-speckled prize. Now, let's zoom in on the antagonist of this epic drama. Let's truly understand the Manichaean devil, because this is where the intellectual DNA that would later get spliced into Western thought truly lies. To understand the Prince of Darkness is to understand a conception of evil so total, so absolute, that it makes the early Christian Satan look like a mere functionary, a troublesome bureaucrat in God's divine government. The Manichaean Prince of Darkness isn't a subordinate who got out of line. He is the CEO of a rival eternal corporation, an uncreated, self-sufficient source of all malice, chaos, and suffering. He was never good. He never stood in the presence of the Father of Greatness. He is and always has been the polar opposite of light. This isn't a story of rebellion, it's a story of fundamental ontological opposition. In the Manichaean worldview, this Prince of Darkness is the king of, the Greek word for primordial, chaotic matter. His very essence is intertwined with the physical world. Where the God of light is pure spirit, the Prince of Darkness is pure, aggressive materiality. His kingdom is described in horrifying detail, not as a singular place like hell, but as a chaotic realm of warring tribes and monstrous archons, each embodying a different form of evil: greed, wrath, envy, sedition. He isn't just a tempter who whispers bad ideas in your ear. He is the very source code of the fleshly desires and destructive impulses that rage within the human experience. His greatest act of creation was, in fact, the creation of the first human beings, Adam and Eve. This is a shocking inversion of the Genesis story. In the Manichaean myth, after the archons had devoured the particles of light, they were forced by celestial beings to construct the physical world as a prison. To further secure their stolen treasure, two particularly powerful archons, Saklas and Nebroel, created Adam and Eve in their own image. Adam and Eve were designed as the ultimate prisons for the divine light, with the added diabolical feature of sexual reproduction. Procreation was seen as a satanic mechanism, a way of shattering the light into smaller and smaller fragments, trapping it in an ever-increasing number of material bodies, making the grand cosmic rescue operation that much harder. The body itself, with its needs, its desires, its decay, and its death, was the handiwork of the Prince of Darkness. The very act of being alive in a physical sense was to be entangled in the machinations of evil. This absolute dualism provided a profound, and for many, deeply satisfying explanation for the problem of evil. Think about the theological knots that early Christian thinkers had to tie themselves in. If God is all good, all-powerful, and all-knowing, why does evil exist? Why do children get sick? Why do natural disasters happen? The Christian answer often involved free will, divine tests, or the mysterious nature of God's plan, answers that can feel intellectually and emotionally thin in the face of true tragedy. Manichaeism cut right through that knot. It said, bad things happen because the world is partially controlled by a bad creator. The suffering you experience is not a test from a good God, it is the natural climate of a prison built by a dark one. Your physical body is a tool of the enemy. Your lust, your greed, your anger, these aren't just personal failings, they are the enemy's presence within you, the very substance of darkness warring against the light of your soul. Now, contrast this with the developing concept of Satan in early Christianity. In the Hebrew Bible, the is often not a proper name, but a title, the accuser. He is a member of the divine council, a sort of heavenly prosecutor whose job is to test the piety of humans, as seen in the book of Job. He operates under God's authority. In the New Testament, his role is expanded. He becomes the great adversary, the tempter of Christ, the prince of this world, and the father of lies. But even here, his origin is clear. He is a created being, an angel who through pride fell from grace. He is powerful, yes, but his power is finite and permitted by God. He is a rebel, not a rival. He did not create the world. In fact, the book of Genesis explicitly states that God's creation was good. For early Christian theologians like Origen or later Augustine, evil was not a substance in itself. It was a privation or absence of good, just as darkness is the absence of light. A wound is not a thing itself, but a lack of healthy flesh. Evil was a corruption of the good creation, not a competing creation. This is a subtle but monumentally important philosophical difference. The Manichaean Prince of Darkness is an active, creative, eternal. The early Christian Satan is the result of a privation from the good. One is a king on his own throne. The other is a usurper squatting on a throne that doesn't belong to him. The clarity and sheer narrative power of the Manichaean vision was immense. It presented the universe as a clear-cut black and white struggle, and it gave people a tangible enemy to blame for the misery of the human condition. It was a theology perfectly suited for a world that often felt chaotic, cruel, and unjust. This powerful, compelling vision of an active cosmic evil was now on a collision course with Christianity, and even though the Church would ultimately declare Mani's faith the arch-heresy, the ghost of his Prince of Darkness would linger, waiting to be unconsciously absorbed into the psyche of its enemy. Block 3. Christian Devil Rewired. The stage was now set for one of the great intellectual and spiritual battles of the ancient world. As Manichaeism surged in popularity across the Roman Empire in the 3rd and 4th centuries, it presented a direct and potent challenge to the established Christian Church. This wasn't just a fringe cult. It was a sophisticated, organized religion with its own scriptures, its own bishops, and a compelling theology that appealed to both the common person seeking answers for their suffering and the intellectual elite searching for a rational cosmology. The Church Fathers recognized the threat immediately. Manichaeism's elegant dualism was a seductive poison that, in their view, undermined the very foundation of their faith, the omnipotence of a single, good creator God. The war against Manichaeism had to be won, not just in the streets, but in the minds of the greatest thinkers of the age. And the central figure in this conflict, the man who stood with one foot in each world, was one of the most influential figures in all of Western history, Augustine of Hippo. Before he was Saint Augustine, the revered bishop and theologian, he was a brilliant, restless young man in North Africa, tormented by one question above all: whence is evil? He found the Old Testament God, who seemed at times wrathful and capricious, to be a stumbling block. He could not reconcile the existence of profound suffering with the idea of an all-powerful, benevolent creator. And then he found the Manichaeans. For 9 years, from the age of 19 to 28, Augustine was a hearer, a lay follower of Mani's teachings. He was utterly captivated. He wrote in his "I still thought that it is not we who sin, but some other nature that sins within us." Manichaeism offered him a perfect intellectual escape hatch. It absolved God of any responsibility for evil and located the struggle outside of his own personal moral failings, placing it within a grand cosmic conflict. It made perfect sense. Eventually, however, Augustine grew disillusioned. He found the Manichaean cosmology, with its elaborate myths about the sun and moon being ships of light, to be at odds with the burgeoning science and astronomy of the day. The final straw was his long-awaited meeting with the celebrated Manichaean bishop, Faustus of Milev. Augustine came armed with deep philosophical and scientific questions, but found Faustus to be a charming but ultimately shallow man, unable to defend the faith on an intellectual level. The spell was broken. Augustine would go on to convert to Orthodox Christianity, be baptized, and become its most formidable champion. And who was his first and most persistent target? The very faith he had once embraced. In his voluminous writings against the Manichaeans, Augustine was forced to articulate the Christian position on God, creation, and evil with a precision and depth that had never been required before. He was the insider, the former agent who knew the enemy's playbook inside and out. He formulated the definitive Christian doctrine of evil as a privation of good, and championed the idea of free will as the mechanism by which evil enters God's good creation. But here is the great historical irony, the secret rewiring of the Christian devil. In order to fight the Manichaeans, Augustine and the Church had to meet them on their own terms. To counter the appeal of the powerful, active, and terrifyingly clear Prince of Darkness, Christian theology had to present its own antagonist as an equally formidable, if ultimately subordinate foe. The Church could never, and would never, accept dualism. God remained absolutely sovereign. But in the process of refuting Mani, they inadvertently absorbed his emphasis on the what of evil. Satan had to be more than just an abstract absence of good to compete in the popular imagination. He needed to be a compelling character. The battle against Manichaeism forced a theological arms race. The Prince of Darkness had a kingdom. Therefore, Satan's dominion over hell and the fallen world was emphasized more strongly. The Prince of Darkness was an active, malevolent intelligence. Therefore, Satan's role as a cunning, personal tempter and cosmic adversary was amplified. This subtle shift can be seen over the centuries. The devil of the Middle Ages, the horned, hoofed monarch of a fiery kingdom, leading armies of demons in a direct war for human souls, is a figure far more grand, far more substantial, and far more dualistic in feel than the accuser of the Old Testament. He is the Lord of an anti-kingdom, the perfect negative image of God. While Christian doctrine always maintained that he was a fallen creature, the popular and even theological depiction of him gave him many of the attributes of Mani's dark god. The Church officially rejected the theology of two gods, but unofficially absorbed the psychology of two kingdoms. The clarity of the Manichaean vision of evil, its stark black and white struggle, was too powerful a narrative tool to ignore. It provided a simple, dramatic framework for understanding the moral struggles of life. And so, the legacy of the forgotten heretic from Persia endured in the shadow of his greatest enemy. Mani was executed for his beliefs, his followers were persecuted for centuries, and his religion was eventually wiped from the face of the earth. He lost the war. But his central idea, the concept of a powerful, personified, absolute evil locked in a cosmic struggle with good, left an indelible mark on the victor. The Christian devil we recognize today, a figure of immense power, the ruler of his own domain, the ultimate adversary in a cosmic war, was forged in the fires of the battle against Manichaeism. Mani's religion of light may be forgotten, but its shadow stretches even to today, shaping the very face of the darkness we think we know.